Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a world that often teaches us to be nice instead of honest, to be agreeable instead of authentic. We're told that if we make others happy, we'll be loved in return. But what if I told you that real connection, real respect, and real love don't come from how much you give, but from what you refuse to give away? Tonight, we're not talking about selfishness. We're talking about self-respect, the kind that quietly says, I won't shrink to fit into someone else's comfort. This is about boundaries, the invisible strength that defines your value. There's a difference between leaving because you're angry and walking away because you've finally remembered who you are. The moment you stop justifying mistreatment or waiting for someone to figure it out, you're not giving up on love, you're honoring yourself. People often mistake silence and distance for ego or indifference, but the truth is, it takes incredible strength to walk away from someone you care about when they're not meeting your emotional needs. The reality is that self-worth is not proven in how long you hold on. It's often revealed in the decision to let go. Anyone can stay in hope. Anyone can argue for love. But it takes a deep internal shift to say, this isn't where I belong, even when your heart is still attached. That choice doesn't come from pride, it comes from clarity. When someone's words stop matching their actions, or when the energy begins to feel inconsistent, you feel it, the subtle pull that something isn't right. But we silence ourselves, we rationalize, we tell ourselves that love means patience or understanding, or giving them more time. But what we forget is that love should not feel like a slow erosion of who we are. If you constantly have to fight to be heard, seen, or prioritized, it's not love, it's survival, and there's no peace in that. Walking away isn't about making the other person feel bad. It's not about revenge or games or trying to get a reaction. It's a quiet, decisive act of self-preservation. It's the moment you stop proving and start protecting. You realize that the more you overextend to be enough for someone, the further you get from being enough for yourself. There's a kind of power in walking away that doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need a big scene. Sometimes it's as simple as stopping the text you used to send, the check-in you used to offer, the excuses you made for their behavior. It's the removal of energy, not to punish, but because your energy deserves to go where it is reciprocated. And the moment you walk away is when they often start to notice. Not because they suddenly understand everything, but because they feel the absence of something they didn't value enough when they had it. The person who always cared, who always showed up, who always made them feel safe is now gone. And now they have to sit in the space where you used to be, but this isn't about them, it's about you. The truth is, the most dangerous thing a woman can be is someone who finally stops waiting for permission to be loved the right way. That moment you choose peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, and self-respect over approval. It's a turning point. You become magnetic not because you're unavailable, but because you're unapologetically rooted in your own worth. You start to attract differently, speak differently, expect differently. The way you love yourself sets the tone for every interaction, and when someone tries to come back, they're not returning to the same version of you they once knew. They're coming back to a woman who no longer lowers her standards to keep the connection alive, and the fear that used to hold you hostage, the fear of being alone, of not being enough, of losing someone you loved, starts to fade. Because you realize that walking away didn't break you, it built you. You're not cold, you're not closed, you're just clear, clear on what you need, clear on what you won't tolerate, clear on what you bring to the table. Walking away is the act of reclaiming yourself in a world that constantly asks you to compromise. It's a quiet revolution, not in what you say, but in what you no longer accept, and you may still miss them. That's okay. You may still wonder what could have been if they had just shown up differently, but in time you'll come to understand that what you walked away from wasn't just them. It was a version of you that didn't yet know how powerful you are. Because the strongest love you'll ever experience starts when you stop begging for someone else's. There's something strange about timing when it comes to relationships. A woman can give her heart fully, be present, loyal, supportive, and emotionally invested, and yet be taken for granted simply because her presence feels so consistent, so reliable. She becomes the person he expects to always be there. The check-in text, the safe space after a long day, the one who forgives, listens, waits, and believes in his potential even when he's not showing much progress, and in that comfort he often forgets that she's a choice, not a guarantee. What many men don't realize in the moment is that her patience isn't endless. She may care deeply, but even the most loving heart has limits. She's not waiting around because she lacks options. She's waiting because she sees something in him. But when that grace gets mistaken for weakness, or worse, for obligation, a shift begins to happen. Slowly, she stops explaining how she feels. She stops reaching out. She starts detaching, not because she's angry, but because she's exhausted from carrying the emotional weight alone. Then comes the moment she finally lets go, and it's quiet. No grand drama, no final text full of accusations, just space, just distance, just silence, and that's when he feels it, not right away. Maybe not in the first few days or even weeks. At first, he might think she's just giving him room. Maybe she'll come back like she always does. Maybe she'll miss him first, but time keeps passing and she doesn't reach out. And slowly, he starts noticing the difference, the absence, the shift in his world now that she's no longer in it. He misses the sound of her voice at the end of a hard day. He notices how no one else understands him the way she did. How other conversations feel shallow in comparison. How no one checks in on him with the same sincerity. He replays old messages, scrolls through pictures, hears her laugh in his head. The things he used to overlook, the way she encouraged him when he doubted himself, the softness in her tone when he was overwhelmed, the way she showed up even when it wasn't convenient, suddenly feel irreplaceable. It's not that he didn't care before, he just didn't feel the loss yet, and loss has a way of waking people up in a way comfort never can. There's something about the realization that someone who once made you their world no longer answers your calls that cuts deeper than expected. That clarity doesn't come when she's still fighting for him. It comes when she's gone, and not just physically, but emotionally gone. He sees now what he couldn't appreciate before. She was rare, and it's not just her kindness he remembers, it's her strength. The strength it took to walk away, the courage it required to stop settling for being half loved. He realizes she didn't leave because she stopped caring. She left because she started caring about herself just a little more. And the respect that grows in her absence is often stronger than what existed when she was still trying to prove her worth. That's when regret shows up, not just for what he lost, but for how little he saw when he had the chance to see everything. He realizes the things she was asking for weren't unreasonable. They were actually the bare minimum, the communication, the consistency, the respect, the effort, and suddenly he wishes he could rewind. Say the right thing, show up differently, but the truth is, it's not that she stopped being the right woman. It's that he failed to be the right man while she was still standing in front of him, and that's what men carry with them long after she's gone. Not just her memory, but the knowledge that she was willing to give him the world, and he couldn't meet her halfway. That realization hits differently than heartbreak. It's not just about love lost, it's about opportunity wasted. It's about the chance he didn't take seriously enough until it was no longer available, because sometimes it's only in her absence that her presence becomes undeniable. There's a misconception so many people grow up with, that love is something you earn by being agreeable, accommodating, and endlessly available. That if you say yes more than you say no, if you make sacrifices quietly and never create tension, people will stay. That if you become easy to love, someone will love you back in the way you hope for, but over time, that belief begins to wear you down because pleasing people doesn't lead to deeper connection. It leads to quiet resentment and emotional invisibility. When someone is always trying to keep the peace, they often lose their own. They say yes when they mean no. They stay silent when something hurts. They avoid confrontation to keep the other person comfortable. But in that silence, they send a message they don't even realize. Your comfort is more important than my truth. And once that becomes the pattern, it's incredibly hard to reverse. The truth is, respect isn't born out of how flexible or agreeable you are. Respect comes from how clearly you communicate who you are and what you need. It's born out of boundaries, the invisible lines that protect your energy, your values, and your emotional well-being. Boundaries are not walls that shut people out. They are filters that show others how to treat you. And the people who are meant to be in your life won't be pushed away by your boundaries. They'll be drawn to your clarity. People don't admire those who bend over backwards to be liked. They may appreciate the convenience of it, but it doesn't create admiration. What earns admiration is self-respect. When you calmly say, "This doesn't work for me," or "I'm not okay with that," you're not creating distance, you're creating definition. You're showing others that you're not afraid to walk away from what doesn't align with your values. And that makes people take you seriously. Boundaries also reveal who's really there for you and who's there for what you offer. When you start to say no, when you stop always being available, some people will pull away, and that's not a loss, it's clarity. The ones who stay are the ones who see your value beyond your usefulness. They respect you not because you give them everything, but because you don't give yourself away just to be chosen. What often happens is that people confuse boundaries with selfishness. But being selfish is about prioritizing yourself at the expense of others. Having boundaries is about valuing yourself and teaching others to do the same. It's not unkind to say, "I need space," or "I won't tolerate that behavior." In fact, it's one of the kindest things you can do for a relationship, because it sets a clear foundation for mutual respect. When you live without boundaries, you teach people to believe they can cross you without consequence. And once that belief is embedded in a dynamic, it's incredibly hard to undo. That's when people start dismissing your feelings. That's when your needs are seen as optional. And that's when you start shrinking yourself to avoid conflict. But when you draw a line, not from anger but from love, you give people the choice to rise to your standards or walk away, and that choice is powerful because real respect isn't begged for or bought. It's earned when someone realizes you're not afraid to stand alone if it means standing in your truth. You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate, by what you accept, and by how consistently you reinforce your values. If you're always giving in, people will assume your limits don't exist. But when you uphold your boundaries, even when it's uncomfortable, people start to see you differently. They may not always agree with you, but they'll know where you stand. And in a world full of people pretending to be okay with everything, clarity is rare. Respect doesn't grow in the soil of overpleasing. It grows in the space created by someone brave enough to say, "This is who I am, and this is what I expect." And once that message is sent clearly, the right people don't run from it. They rise to meet it. In the end, it's not how much you bend that makes someone stay. It's how clearly you stand. Respect isn't earned through sacrifice at the expense of your soul. It's earned when you know your limits and protect them with quiet conviction. Stop asking people to treat you better. Show them how. Because when you raise your standards, the right people don't leave. They step up.